and go back to the negotiation table. It is truly a double standard for the United States to engage in negotiation all the time until the moment they struck at Iran. So I think this has destroyed and undermined the trust.
谈判桌还没有撤，导弹已经飞出去了，这就是某些大国所谓的外交诚意。高志凯教授，苏州大学讲席教授，曾任邓小平英文翻译。这一次他从北京连线国际媒体，直面镜头，说出了很多人想说却不敢说的话。就在伊核谈判最关键的节点，这帮美以联军悍然动手，导弹落在伊朗领土之上，最高领袖哈梅内伊就此罹难，整个中东火药味瞬间冲破天际。更令人窒息的是，这不是第一次了，主持人当场点出，上一回打伊朗他们也是在谈判途中发动的，一边喝着调解人端上的茶，一边悄悄按下发射按钮。这哪里是大国外交，这是赤裸裸的政治欺诈，是对伊朗主权的公然践踏，是对国际法的蓄意撕毁。不料高教授在镜头前的这一番话让整个局面瞬间逆转，他不仅逐字拆解了美以的法律接口，更点名指出正是内塔尼亚胡把美国的军事力量当成四器，一步一步把这场战争推向深渊。中国的立场也在这一刻说得清清楚楚。让我们来看高教授究竟说了什么。
And this war was not started by Iran. It is started by Israel, coupled with the United States. So the United States and Israel are engaged in this war of aggression against Iran, violating Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And the Chinese government emphasized that Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity should be fully respected. And China is calling for de-escalation and ceasefire immediately, because otherwise you do not know how much evil this whole situation may degenerate in, because this may degenerate into a regional war or even with more global implications, because first of all, energy security will be undermined, and it may also lead to a big financial crisis. So the world itself will suffer the consequences of this unwanted war launched by the United States and Israel against a sovereign country. And Iran is now exercising full right of self-defense against the aggressors.
So Victor, what about when it comes to international law and UN Charter? Do these military actions by US and Israel violate those?
Absolutely. I think in this particular case, Israel committed act of aggression against Iran, and the United States aided and abetted Israel and joined in this act of aggression against Iran. By international law, there should be no doubt that Iran is under attack and is suffering the consequences of this aggression. And I think Iran has full justification to fight back. Now, several countries, including Prime Minister of Britain, said Iran has been attacking several other countries. It's because these countries host US military bases. And from these military bases, acts of aggression has been committed by the US troops and military facilities based in these countries. And I think by international law, Iran has full justification to strike back. But of crucial importance is what China is calling for: de-escalation and ceasefire, and go back to the negotiation table. It is truly a double standard for the United States to engage in negotiation all the time until the moment they struck at Iran. So I think this has destroyed and undermined the trust the United States need to possess as a major power.
Yeah, you make a good point, because the last time Israel and United States hit Iran, they were also in the middle of negotiations back in June, with the Omanis playing the role of the mediators. And Oman's foreign minister gave a number of interviews, and he said he was optimistic that the two sides could work something out and avert a military crisis. Let me move on to the United Nations Security Council. What can we expect from the UNSC? What should we expect? And can they at this point really do anything? Victor, you know, there's a lot of people that say the UN has become rather irrelevant. They say a lot of things, but nothing really ever happens.
Well, I think the United Nations Security Council need to come into an immediate emergency session right away to deliberate about this particular war of aggression against Iran. However, I don't think it is realistic to expect anything substantive coming out of the Security Council because the United Nations will definitely exercise its veto power. We tend to blame the United Nations for the deadlock, for the inefficiency. However, allow me to emphasize, the United Nations, especially the Security Council, have at least performed well in preventing the outbreak of a third world war. To that extent, I think, despite of all its imperfections, the United Nations, including the Security Council, have done its job. And I hope what Israel and the United States are doing right now, committing acts of aggression against Iran, will not lead to regional conflict or even global warfare, which may eventually lead to the Third World War.
What damage was likely done to Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure back in June, Victor? You probably remember the Trump administration repeatedly told us Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. So my question to you is whether this time around, is it still about Iran's nuclear and military capabilities, or is it about something else?
Well, first of all, as far as the Middle East is concerned, it is completely unacceptable for one country, that is Israel, to have developed the nuclear weapons and sometimes to declare their intention to use nuclear weapons, and at the same time to deny another country, which is Iran, a sovereign country with its own independence, from developing nuclear weapons. Now, Iran has repeatedly reaffirmed that it has no intention to develop nuclear weapons, but it has the right to use nuclear power for peaceful purposes. So I think this whole issue needs to be brought to a negotiation table, and there was an international agreement covering the peaceful use of nuclear power by Iran, but the United States chose to walk out of that agreement, which eventually led to the war and conflagration we are faced with as we speak. So I think it is time for the United States to really do what a major power is supposed to do, to exercise its leadership and statesmanship, to engage in peaceful negotiation rather than resorting to war, especially United States should refuse to be misguided by Israel and its prime minister, and refuse to be used as an instrument by Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu in using the U.S. military power to commit acts of aggression against Iran. I don't think the American people want to fight a war against the Iranian people, and I hope things will go back to normal and de-escalation will happen, and the United States will really think twice before they pull the trigger, including when they are misled by another country, in this case, Israel, and especially its Prime Minister Netanyahu, in taking advantage of the U.S. military power to invade and committing acts of aggression against Iran.
Victor, my final question to you is the relationship between China and the United States is often described as the most important bilateral relationship in the world. Is this crisis going to affect that relationship?
Well, China-U.S. relations are the most consequential and impactful bilateral relations in the world of today. I think, and I believe, China has the ability to compartmentalize many different issues. So we condemn such acts of aggression. We condemn the violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran by Israel and the United States. On the other hand, I think there are channels between China and the United States to keep talking with each other and make sure that there are no issues between China and the United States which may flare up into uncertainty and uncontrollability, for example. And China and the United States will need to deal with each other on equal terms. And I hope China and the United States will eventually agree that war should be the last resort rather than the first resort. And negotiations should not be used as a disguise for launching a war against a sovereign country. I think from the Chinese philosophy, war should always be the last resort. And it seems that the United States under President Trump is eager to use war to solve problems, which may turn out to be unsolvable if you use war. these issues can be better resolved if you use peace and use diplomacy. Never lose patience about peace and negotiation, and never go to pull the trigger on a sovereign country and independent country, especially a country like Iran, which has about 5,000 or even 6,000 years of civilization.
Yes, China and Iran, both two of the oldest civilizations in the world. Victor Gao, I know it's very early morning in Beijing, so we really appreciate you staying up and talking to us.
Thank you very much.
看完这场采访，我的心情说复杂也复杂，说简单也很简单，愤怒，但又感到一种难得的大快人心。愤怒的是一个主权国家的最高领袖就这样在一场未宣之战中殒命，大快人心的是终于有人站在国际镜头面前把这件事的本质说清楚了。说出来这件事本身就是一种力量，我们不妨先来梳理一个问题，这场战争到底是怎么打起来的。心理学上有一个概念叫认知失调，意思是说当一个人的行为和他的自我形象产生矛盾，他不会选择改变行为，而是选择扭曲现实，替自己找理由。这个逻辑在美国的中东政策里几乎每隔几年就上演一次，一边高喊基于规则的国际秩序，一边在谈判最敏感的时间节点直接向伊朗开枪，连主持人都忍不住承认这不是第一次。上一回打伊朗也是在谈判途中下手的，这不叫双重标准，这是根本没有标准。高教授说了一个我们不得不正视的细节，伊朗核协议当年各方历尽艰辛才签署，本来是一条通往和平的出路，但美国说退就退，单方面撕毁，就好像你和邻居费尽口舌好不容易签了停战协议，对方却第二天早上拆掉围栏，还说是你先动手的。在我们眼里这种逻辑荒谬的无从反驳，但它就是这样一次又一次的发生在这个世界上。那份协议被撕毁的那一刻，就是今天这场战争的起点。还有一点，高教授说的尤为到位，以色列自己拥有核武器，甚至曾公开宣示使用核武器的意图，却反过来阻止伊朗发展核能的和平用途。根据伊朗红新月会的统计，这场空袭的死亡人数已经攀升至555人。555条生命在消灭核威胁的名义下消失了。这种双重标准我们深知，全世界也都看得见，只是太多人选择了沉默。中国没有沉默，外交部发言人清清楚楚地定性，这场军事行动是公然侵略，是对联合国宪章的践踏，是对国际关系基本准则的蓄意违反。就连中方事先完全不知情这一事实，也再次揭示了华盛顿所谓的盟友沟通不过是一句空话。这就是中国在这个时刻的意义，不是挑衅，不是对抗，而是在最混乱的时刻说出那个最清醒的判断。我们中国人讲究一个道理，战争永远应该是最后的手段，而不是第一个选项。高教授最后那句话我反复回味，谈判不应该成为发动战争的伪装，这句话值得全世界记住。两个拥有超过5000年文明历史的民族，中国人与伊朗人都深深懂得一件事，真正的强大从来不是靠炸弹来证明的，历史的车轮不会因为导弹的爆炸声而停止转动，那些以为可以用轰炸重塑秩序的人，终将在历史的长河中留下自己的名字，只不过留的是骂名，不是功绩。而那些在最混乱的时刻依然呼吁理性、呼吁和平的声音，才是这个世界真正需要的力量。你们怎么看？评论区见。